So here's the book I wrote, UFOs over Colorado. I dug real deep into various UFO organizations, contacted a bunch of UFO researchers, got some original cases of my own. And let's just start digging into what I think are the top 20 Colorado cases. And now we move to case number 4, which I had to include because this had a devastating impact on the UFO field. The Condon Committee was commissioned after a wave of sightings over Dexter, Michigan, which caused a lot of publicity, a lot of strife between the Air Force and the public. And it appeared that the Air Force wanted to get out of the UFO business. So they gave the Condon Committee what amounts to about $4 million in, accounting for inflation, to study UFOs officially. And they used exclusively reports from Project Blue Book. This commission was headed by Edward Condon, who was chosen because of his eminent position as a scientist and his, quote, lack of any stated position on UFOs. Also heading the project was Robert Lowe. So Edward Condon was supposed to be impartial. It turned out he was anything but. He was actually a very strong skeptic of UFOs. And this investigation was supposed to be a 2-year investigation. It ended up taking a little bit longer. And from the very beginning, its objectivity was questioned when a memo was leaked out during the investigation in which Robert Lowe and Edward Condon revealed that they were extremely skeptical of the subject. And there's a direct quote saying, "My attitude right now is that there's nothing to it, but I'm not supposed to reach that conclusion for another year." And Condon himself said, "The trick would be, I think, to describe the project so that to the public, it would appear to be a totally objective study, but to the scientific community would present the image of a group of non-believers trying their best to be objective, but having almost zero expectation of finding a saucer." So this was a disaster from the beginning. In fact, a bunch of people who were actually part of the study actually walked off or were fired from the actual project. And the Condon Committee actually concluded in their book that there is nothing to the UFO phenomena. As they said, and I quote, "Nothing has come from the study of UFOs in the past 21 years that has added to scientific knowledge. Careful consideration of the record as it is available to us leads us to conclude that further extensive study of UFOs probably cannot be justified." And they wrote that we have no evidence of secrecy concerning UFO reports. That is completely disingenuous. They knew from the very beginning that UFOs were real. And we're spending our tax dollars, spending an enormous amount of time and effort to cover this up and make witnesses look like fools. And to really put the nail in the coffin, they wrote in the Condon Committee report, and I'm quoting, "A related problem to which we wish to direct public attention is the miseducation in our schools, which arises from the fact that many children are being allowed, if not actively encouraged, to devote their science study time to the reading of UFO books and magazine articles. Therefore, we strongly recommend that teachers refrain from giving students credit for schoolwork based on their reading of the presently available UFO books and magazine articles." And that made me laugh when I read that. So not surprisingly, the Condon Committee's results came under immediate attack by many prominent people. The American Institute of Astronautics and Aeronautics formed a committee actually to study the results. And after a year, they rejected Condon's conclusions, stating, and I quote, we find it difficult to ignore the small residue of well-documented but unexplainable cases that form the hard core of the UFO controversy. Many UFO researchers also rejected it, including Stanton Friedman, a very prominent UFO researcher. J. Allen Hynek, he pointed out that fully 30% of the sightings still remained unidentified. John Fuller, author of The Incident at Exeter and the book about Betty and Barney Hill's encounter, The Interrupted Journey, he called it, quote, a flying saucer fiasco. Dr. James McDonald, an atmospheric physicist and one of the first scientists to take the UFO subject seriously, he wrote, in all, I believe the contents of the Condon Committee failed dismally to support the strong negative recommendations which Condon has presented in his own summary analysis. And John Northrop of Northrop Aircraft in Lockheed called the committee, quote, one of the most deliberate cover-ups ever perpetrated on the public. Look magazine wrote an article about this, and this got the attention of Congress. And Congressman Edward Roosh read this article in Look magazine and said that the story in Look raises grave doubts as to the scientific profundity of the project. I am recommending that we launch a congressional investigation. Congressman William Bates also agreed and said, I think it would be good to get another group of scientists to take a look at this matter so we can be more certain of the decision which are being made. So despite all of this, the Condon Committee reached negative conclusions and Project Blue Book was closed down shortly later. This did lead to a congressional investigation in which James McDonald and others testified before Congress. And unfortunately, this did cause a lot of people to take a negative viewpoint of UFOs. I've talked to many witnesses myself who did not believe in UFOs for years because of the results of the Condon Committee. So this had a devastating impact, I think, on how people viewed UFOs and really caused untold damage and led to a lot of ridicule and disbelief on this subject. While at very high levels of government, they knew full well that this was absolutely a real phenomenon. So that's why I gave it the number 4 case on this list. One of the guys, David R. Saunders, who was actually part of this committee, wrote a book absolutely lambasting this study and saying exactly what happened with this project.